A new treaty will be able to allow Australia to block China and other countries from striking security deals with Nauru. It will be in exchange for $140 million in financial support from Australian taxpayers. The Navy has also announced that it has test-fired a tomahawk missile off the US West Coast in a build-up of the ADF's long-range strike capability. Joining us with more is Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Dr Malcolm Davis. Malcolm, good to see you as always. Thank you. Deterrence is the key word here, isn't it? The government notching up these moves in a bid to deter China.
Absolutely. I mean, the main issue that confronts us in our defence environment is China. It's China's willingness to engage in provocative behaviour in the South China Sea against Taiwan and also in the South Pacific. And that deal with Nauru, I think, is a perfect example of the Australian government trying to set up arrangements whereby they can block China from engaging in increasing their presence in the region. That would not only be a detriment to the regional security of the Pacific Island states, but also directly against Australia itself.
And Malcolm, looking a bit further afield, plenty of focus, of course, on the upheaval in Syria. Overnight, we've seen hundreds of airstrikes launched by Israel into Syria. It does seem like Israel is intent at this point in pretty much decimating the country's military capabilities while this is all going on.
And I think that's a very sensible move on the part of the Israelis. What the Israelis are trying to do is prevent groups like Islamic State and other hostile groups from gaining control of abandoned Syrian military capabilities, so things like tanks, armoured fighting vehicles, aircraft, that sort of thing, as well as Syrian naval vessels. And so what you've seen is the Israelis undertake these wave of massive strikes that basically are decimating the entire Syrian military in a matter of days. And so what will happen is that Syria in the end ends up without a military capability at all. All they will have is very light ground forces that will basically be run by the rebels. And if the rebels do not uphold their promise to be a more reasonable force, if they become a hostile actor, then they won't have any means to attack Israel in that event.
Yeah, it's a move that has been condemned by some of Israel's neighbours. How does the last sort of 48 hours that we've seen really impact the dynamics in the region?
Look, I think there are some fairly tumultuous changes occurring, which everyone in the strategic policy community is kind of racing to keep up with. I think that, firstly, we're seeing a huge setback for the Russians in the region. The Russians currently still have access to their two big bases in Syria, Haiman Air Base and Tartarus Naval Base. But how long they have access to those bases is anyone's guess. It could be they lose access very quickly, in which case the Russians no longer have the means really to project power against NATO's southern flank or to project power into Africa. So that's the first big setback. Secondly, by taking out the Assad government, you are now seeing Hezbollah in Lebanon even more isolated and cut off than before. The Israelis have moved to the top of Mount Hermon, which gives them a greater ability to interdict any attempts by Iran to interfere and to project reinforcements across to Hezbollah. And finally, Iran, I think, has been shown to be very weak indeed in terms of its so-called axis of resistance. Its credibility is shot. So I think that there have been some fairly significant changes in the region.
Malcolm Davis, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.